Carrie.
But anyway, so that was just like a comical addition to our trip where Molly's like on the cell phone and I'm like checking the trail and there's like other hikers who are trying to ask me where they should go. And then Molly's like, Carrie, like what do you want me to say to him about this thing? Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
Timberline Trail Edition,
Day 1.
So today we're going to cover our trip on the Timberline Trail from the Timberline Lodge to Cooper's Spur campsite, or what would you call it?
We were like at the shelter.
Shelter structure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that actually is a day that on paper doesn't look too big, but for us it kind of was, and we'll talk about why.
Yeah.
But to start, actually, we had never met one of our hiking partners before because one of our friends that we were going to hike with was someone we knew very well because she was our neighbor, and then we were bringing her brother along. So the night before, in true Carrie and Molly fashion, of course, the day before we like went to church, went out for lunch with our grandparents, went to a party for all of her former coworkers, and then we showed up at Kate's house and we all got together. We sifted through what stuff we wanted to bring. We packed our packs. I kind of showed him how to pack a bear can, and I don't know, we cut all the tags off of anything that needed tags cut off of it, and it was just a fun
Indian
little party.
Food from Cuisine India.
Yep.
It was like all the elements that you could want for this like the most wonderful day combined, and then the next day we were gonna go backpacking. So it doesn't get much better than that.
Yep. So
Carrie and I decided we were gonna use this as an opportunity to almost do like weighted backpacking. So
a little extra training.
We offered to carry Kate and Drew's food just so that we could continue to kind of build stamina for other things we were gonna do. So yeah, we had honestly pretty
decently
loaded
heavy packs,
bear cans and fairly heavy packs, and so it was kind of nice because we knew we just wanted to use this as a training opportunity as well as just enjoying the beautiful scenery.
Yeah, this wasn't really like a ultralight serious sort of trip or anything like that. We had a like actual climbing trip that we were going to go on after it. So we just kind of wanted to make sure we were in tip-top shape. So we had all our stuff gathered together and we actually got an early-ish start the next day. I think we got to the Timberline Lodge before 9. So that was pretty good because we were staying a few hours away. And I just remember driving up there. It was such a clear day. It was just beautiful. The temperatures were perfect. I don't remember what they were, but it was like ideal for me. Yeah. I'm a very cool temp type of hiker. I'm not like 80s and above. I mean, I'm just going to be dragging, but I'll still do it. And it was like a gorgeous day. And, you know, as you go up Mount Hood, you know, it's just like all these curves and it just felt very poetic to me and very fun.
And you'd been up to the Timberline Lodge one time before, I think.
Yeah, I spent very little time on Mount Hood. And the only other time I went to the Timberline Lodge was when I had gotten off work from my night shift.
Oh, gosh.
And it was the 4th of July.
We're going to
And so Molly had the day off. So we were going to do a quick hike up Tom, Dick, and Harry by Mount Hood. And then I was going to come back home to Salem, go to sleep, and go to work that night. And of course, I come home and there's like 1,000 ants in our kitchen. Like,
it's,
so many.
Carrie gets home when she worked her night shift. She usually get back at about 8:30 a.m. And so I was up and like getting everything ready so that she could get home, just like eat breakfast, and then we would leave so we could go
I was gonna eat in
hiking
the car.
on Mount Hood. And I think, was it right as you walked in the door?
I opened the door and I was like, did you know that there's a trail of 8,000 ants that's going from the door to the counter?
I think there's an ant superhighway running through our entryway. And I was like, what? And we had this like fluctuating issue with ants that was a seasonal thing. Like it wasn't
never that
year-round.
bad, though.
But there was just like all of these ants like trucking through. And so we like had the vacuum and like we were just cleaning up ants.
I
would
say that I have been to Mount Hood in a very demoralized, tired state where we got to Tom, Dick, and Harry then late, and the trailhead's like completely packed because it's a holiday and a beautiful day. And so then we were like, we're just going to go up to the Timberline Lodge and walk around. And I think I even like fell down. I got a hole in my shoe that day. And then...
And this was July 4th, and we like turned around because then we hit snow.
Yeah, there was a ton of snow.
And what year was that? Was it
2021, I want to say, probably.
So that was Carrie's experience at the Timberline Lodge.
Yeah.
I'd been there a couple times going snowboarding, but never to really do much hiking over there. So as Carrie said, we're driving up the road that winds its way up to the Timberline Lodge, and it was just so beautiful to like, I don't know, drive up onto Mount Hood like that. Yeah. And we were just so excited to go backpacking, so excited to hang out with Kate and Drew on the mountain. And so it was, just like a very fun experience getting ready to get on the trail.
And one nice thing is there's so much parking at the Timberline Lodge. Like, there's all these parking lots. But a good thing to note is if you're planning to go on the Timberline Trail, just make sure to double check with, like, the parking attendants, I guess, basically, because there's one lot that you can park in if you're going to be parked overnight and not a guest. Otherwise, if you're parking in lots closer to the lodge, you have to be a guest, or I think they'll, like, tow your car if you park overnight. So
check
try not to do that.
And I remember as we were driving up there, Kate had, I think, made a couple things, and we ate breakfast at her house before we left, but we were also, I feel like, right before you hit the trail, you're like, oh my gosh, all the food I get to eat, I'm going to carry with me. Yeah. So what can I eat right now that I'm just like extra full before I actually have to start carrying my own food? And I like found this bag of chips, and I was like, it's like 8:30 a.m. just like eating chips, like just trying to eat whatever I could find.
Hey, there was also some bran muffins. Although you maybe don't want to eat too many of those before you hit the trail.
You gotta be a little bit judicious.
Conservative.
In the amount of bran muffins that you eat. But so it took us a minute, I think, to just kind of like make sure we had everything.
We used the bathroom.
Yeah.
Not at the lodge. There's like a skiing area, right? What is that?
It's like the Y East
The Timberline Toilets is, I believe, what it's called. That's what I use it as.
Oh, but we kind of just like got everything straightened up, and I think it was like 9 a.m. exactly when we actually hit the trail. And the thing that gets me every time it even confuses me skiing there. There's so many different little pathways around the Timberline area that,
and like roped off sections.
It's hard to know where to go. Yeah. So we were like, we're hitting the trail, and you start your watch, and we're walking, and we just like get to the end of the path.
No, you go in a circle.
Oh,
you're like, looky there.
Looky there. We've circumnavigated
a tree.
Yes. And so it took us, I think, a good 5 minutes to actually figure out the correct little walking path to actually get up onto the PCT to hop onto the Timberline Trail.
The most painful portion is you have to go uphill on this just cement asphalt road that's for like the people who do maintenance, and it's such a intense grade. Yeah. And you're walking on asphalt, and your pack is full, and it's not like you're using your trekking poles because you're not even walking on a trail, and you're like, it's gonna be too hard for me.
That is like the toughest part of the Timberline Trail, I think. Because then at the very end, when you're descending it, you're like, this is very difficult on asphalt. It's quite the grade. The other grade, though, remember going to Paradise Park on Mount Rainier, how they have that like paved trail, and it just like is so steep. Do you remember that? We like when we went there with Rachel in like November. No, okay,
I don't remember it.
So there are a number of paved trails on mountains that are steep, and this is one of them. Collect them all.
And I remember before we left, actually, too, we were in the parking lot, and it's funny because you're like, everybody's putting on their sunscreen, everyone's putting on their chapstick, everyone's getting out. Do I have my sunglasses? And then there's always that moment of like, who's got the keys? So we get on trail, and we're going counterclockwise. So we immediately leave the PCT, right? Because it's just the Timberline Trail.
Nope. I think we stay on the PCT for like a mile or two, and then it junctions away as we turn.
Oh, okay. So we got on the PCT, I guess. I forgot about that. Yeah. Anyway, so we hop on the PCT, and one thing that was kind of fun is you go downhill right away when you're going counterclockwise, and it's like there's these 2 or 3 miles where it's all extremely sandy, and it's downhill, and sand is just annoying to walk in. Yeah. But walking downhill, it's way less annoying than walking uphill, because I feel like I'd read so much stuff where people are like, the worst miles of the trail are slogging uphill in the sand. And I mean, for us, it was just like, oh, okay, we're walking downhill. Yeah. But it was fun because we were meeting so many hikers who were like, we're going to the Timberline Lodge for their breakfast buffet, and we're so excited to be done. And they were all having a good time. So that was really fun, too.
And I also just think it's like, almost immediately the views really start to get so beautiful.
Unbelievable.
There's a canyon that you start to walk along, and some of the creeks that form the White River at some point are flowing in that canyon, and so you just get this big, beautiful view of Mount Hood as you're descending, and already we were seeing lupin and different wildflowers, and it was just like, oh my gosh, like here we are, it's beautiful. And yeah, it's like
the
a
canyon,
big, beautiful view of the mountain.
The canyon views there are so cool too, because it's like on that side, it's so like the volcanic rock is just so loose, I would say, versus on other sides where it seems like there's a lot more topsoil. It's just like all exposed, and it's just so cool because you can see how the river has like carved its way down through.
And then it's hard to think too, because I mentioned this last time. It's like, I don't know if it's the river carves its way down through or the glacier carves it, and then the river flows in what remained of the glacier. Yeah. I think it's that's basically a lateral moraine that we're walking on. That was from a glacier at some point, and now the river is flowing through. So yeah, it was just a really beautiful view, and we were just like happy to be there, I think.
And I think the most fun thing too about that first beginning area is you are walking through these unbelievable meadows on a ridge. So it's like you're kind of on that very like sandy, you know, soil, and then you kind of go into this area where it's the beautiful meadows and you have nice views of Mount Jefferson and the sisters and all that kind of stuff, and it just feels like it was such a fun thing. It just felt like we're in a movie once again.
The cliff that we're on it's pretty steep. Like I would say it was at least 400 feet, kind of a vertical drop, not too many feet away from the trail. And so, yeah, you feel like you're kind of like peering over the edge of just this expanse, and it's very beautiful. Yeah. So, I think it was a reminder like, oh, this trail is going to be really epic and have amazing views and experiences. And we were already enjoying it, you know, minutes into the trip. So at some point, as you're going downhill, you're probably going to get to a creek crossing or river crossing and then go back uphill. So we did enjoy it. I think it was 2 or almost 3 miles from the Timberline Lodge to White River. But at some point, we did have to stop going downhill and cross a river. So our first crossing of our Timberline Trail experience was the White River.
Which is one of the more major rivers of the trail.
Correct. And so I think we must have hit it sometime,
very early in the day.
Quite early in the day.
Yeah,
and
I'd say before 11 for sure.
In fact, it was probably about 10 a.m. when we got to it. So I think there was a group on the other side of the river, and we could kind of see where they were crossing. I think there were a couple cairns. And so I think it had braided out into 3 different sections, and the first 2, it was just a quick rock hop to get across, and then there was one section at the very end that was a little bit wider. And I think if a person wanted to take their time, you probably could have gone upriver and found a spot to rock hop across. But we thought, well, this is probably a good chance to just practice.
Get your feet wet, literally.
Yeah, to get your feet wet. And because we were taking a couple people with us who, I don't know if they'd really done any creek or river crossings. So we figured, well, it's a good chance to just take off our shoes, put on our tevas for a water crossing, and kind of go over some techniques that we've learned. So when we... What was our first trail, Carrie, where we had like a little bit more of a creek or river crossing that we had to consider? Was it the Glacier Peak Wilderness, do you think?
I think so, probably.
So that, and then there was a trail that we did in northern Washington, the Copper Ridge Loop, and you have to cross the Chilliwack River. So we...
Among other things.
Among many other obstacles. So Carrie is very much into reading, studying, learning, and I think we both had heard some horror stories about people doing creek or river crossings on the Timberline Trail, and how, you know, injury and serious harm can come about if you're not, you know, careful with this. And that being said, you know, the majority of people who cross creeks are just fine, but we always want to be safe. So a couple of the things that I guess we would talk about as far as prerequisites for river crossings would be understanding that it's okay to walk along the river to find the best spot to cross. Where the trail hits the river or creek is not always going to be the best spot,
but not necessarily.
Exactly. So
and it can differ on times of day, right?
Exactly. So knowing that it's perfectly fine and acceptable to go up or downstream to see if you can find a better crossing. One of the things that you taught me as well was just regarding even logs. Like if you're crossing a creek and there's a log, you want to make sure that you are downstream of it, correct?
Yep. Because ideally, if you get swept off your feet, you should be looking at where you're going to run out. So it's like, if the run out is a log behind you, that may not be a great plan, just because you can get caught in that, and it's called a strainer, and it can push you underwater and it could drown you. So it's kind of things like that where you want to be paying attention to that. You always want to be looking upstream too and seeing like, is there anything coming downstream at me? You know, stuff like that, where also just paying attention to the rocks on the edge of the stream. Are these going to crumble underneath my feet? That has happened to me before. And I truly, like, I was in a scenario where I had 3 points of contact, so I thought I was going to be totally fine, and 2 of my points of contact actually crumbled out from under me. And I believe that's actually how a person passed away in the Sandy River, I think. It might not be that one, but I read about someone who passed away, I believe, on Mount Hood because the edge of the river crumbled out from underneath of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is a hard thing to prepare for. So you want to be cognizant of your footing. And, like, you know, sometimes it's underneath, you know, the river can go underneath, you know, and, like, a road. So you just have to be conscious of so many things.
And so, once again, right, like, the Sandy River the White River when we got to it, the deepest portion of it, I think, was about knee deep. So this isn't, you know, a huge deal, but things to be aware of. And like Carrie mentioned, even being aware of the edges of a creek, how they can be more unstable. I think we make a habit when we're planning out a way to cross like a creek, we usually don't stand on the very edge until we're getting ready to approach it and get into it. So that wasn't something that I knew until we learned it from experience.
You're also supposed to unclip your chest clip and your
hip belt
because if you happen to get swept away, it's better to get out of your pack so that you're able to swim and direct yourself versus like being trapped either on your face or on your back and like pushed under because of your pack. And, you know, I don't know. I've read all these things. It's like, it's best if you could be on your back with your feet pointing downstream. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be thinking about that in this scenario.
And I suppose as well, if you were to fall and get swept downstream and your pack is unclipped, if you needed to get out of it, if it got caught up on something.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be more easy.
Exactly.
So those are a couple, I mean, sometimes it feels a little bit silly.
It does feel silly to unclip your stuff
a fairly
sometimes.
shallow creek, but it's always a habit that we do so that we never forget of always unclipping chest and waist.
And I think they say that a swift creek is dangerous if it's up to your shin, basically. So, I mean, just because it looks like it's not that big of a deal doesn't mean that you should not take precautions.
Totally.
You know.
And then, so we've done a fair number of creek crossings that we just wear our shoes during. And that was that one trip in Northern Washington. Yeah. My feet were wet for basically 2 days straight. Yeah. And it was because I feel like we just didn't have the time to stop and take off our shoes. And we had like multiple crossings. We would do one after the other. Yeah. And I mean,
the terrain was not such where you could wear your tubas because it was very...
So this one, though, we decided, like, okay, we've got 2 pairs of socks, and it'd be nice to keep them both dry. So we said, we'll take off our shoes and put on the tevas. And so a couple other things of consideration. So we found an area with the White River that looked like, you know, the distance across wasn't too far. It didn't look like there were any, like, really... eddies in the water that we could see that would indicate that there were a lot of rocks. And it seemed like a pretty smooth flow, which makes it easier to walk through versus when it gets to a pinch point and then it's really blasting through. So we found a spot that looked good to cross and then went across and it was easy breezy. Didn't take very long at all. Honestly, it just felt so good because the icy cold water just like feels refreshing on your legs. And then the one other piece with a crossing is our technique that we have evolved and learned is that we cross sideways. So we sidestep.
No, we don't.
Across
we
a creek.
Upstream, stepping sideways. You're supposed to face upstream.
Well, yes. And we're having a miscommunication. We're saying the same thing. Face upstream and walk sideways across the river.
Yeah,
stepping laterally, but facing upstream.
And that's actually the way that you're supposed to cross the stream too. And if you have your trekking poles, you can set them ahead of you. You can, you know, go ahead and you should always have, you know, 3 points of contact when you're moving your foot type of a thing. Right. Obviously, some days you're crossing a smaller stream and you can just go a little bit better. But it's like, what's the point of falling down also in a stream, even if it's not that deep? Like, ow.
Exactly.
These are lava rocks. They're very sharp.
And the nice thing about the facing upstream, walking sideways across, you always have those 2 trekking poles and the trailing leg that are firm. So if you're stepping laterally and you don't love where your foot is at, it's on a weird slippery rock, it's in like a really deep hole, you have plenty of time to explore and find more places to put your foot, versus if you're walking forward and you're kind of getting pushed like sideways. So that's the way that we go about it. And then we always make sure that we're facing upstream so that we're looking to see if there is something coming downstream towards us. So we could say
it's just a good way for your
body.
So
we could say, oh no,
I know. Not that. Or you could turn. Anyway, so I feel like that was nice because it was just such a good creek crossing to get you in a good mood for the day. But it was funny because then you have to go up right after that. And remember the embankment is kind of eroded, but like muddy eroded. The other embankments that were eroded on this trail were like
dry.
were like sandy eroded, but this was like muddy, so you had to go up. And then this was the first and some of the only down trees on trail, actually.
Yeah.
Because they do a really good job. Well, I guess there were some down trees in other areas. But
for the most part.
It was funny because before we went backpacking this year, I was like, really, we need to do a training where we're crawling under something with our backpack and then climbing over it. So we did that a little bit. But we had to do the climbing over and crawling under. And I was like, now it's real backpacking.
Yeah, and it was kind of some clods of dirt and weird slippery mud and like grabbing onto pieces of grass. And that didn't last for very long. But you're like, okay, I feel like we're having an adventure.
Yeah.
So we started to ascend up from the White River, and it was a pretty steady grade, but a nice grade where you could just keep a nice consistent pace. We saw a couple other groups, and I think everyone we saw was they were finishing their trip clockwise, so they only had a couple miles left till Timberline, and we're in pretty good moods. And so we gained for quite a while, and then we came to more of a meadowy area. We figured we were getting close to Mount Hood Meadows at that point, hence the meadows. Yes. And we started to see a lot of wildflowers.
Yeah, that was beautiful. So pretty. I mean, honestly, you really can't predict when the wildflowers are going to be, but we seriously hit the jackpot this year in August. Everything was just beautiful. I mean, there were so many flowers. I love bear grass, and that was going crazy. The Indian paintbrush and the lupin, and yeah, it was just beautiful. It was purple and yellow and blue and white. Awesome. And anyway, it was just gorgeous. But one thing that I knew was going to be kind of an awkward obstacle for this day was there were 3 days this year that you could not complete the exact Timberline trail. They were going to replace a lift at Mount Hood Meadows. And so there was going to be a detour. And I knew it was going to happen before we came. And I thought, well, should we go clockwise to try to avoid that? But based on the days on the sign, if we went clockwise, we were still going to have to take the reroute. So I said, well, may as well get it over with on day one. Come to find out in the end, they were done with it early. So actually, we wouldn't have had to take the reroute. But they also said that the reroute only was going to add 1 mile, which I don't know who did their mathematics or addition, but it definitely added at least 2, if not 3 miles and 1,000 feet of extra gain. So we kind of came along until we came to the point where there was a guy sitting there, and he said, oh, basically you can't go this way because we're using the helicopters to fly the cement up, which was interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely.
And so there were helicopters flying cement up to replace the lift. So we had to go on this reroute, and I said something like, well, so, you know, is it going to be pretty well marked? And he's like, oh, yeah, there's going to be people at all the junctions that'll tell you where to go, which was funny because there was certainly not people at any of the junctions, except for if you were going to maybe accidentally get back onto the Timberline trail, they'd be like, you can't come here. So I feel like we just kind of made the best of it because I hadn't seen Umbrella Falls before.
No.
But it's very pretty. And this reroute actually took you down to Umbrella Falls and then basically right back up. Yeah. So we kind of headed down, and at Umbrella Falls, we said we may as well have lunch here. We've got a good water source, and it was probably about 6 miles in or so.
Yeah, something
so
like
it
that.
seemed like a good spot for us to take our first lunch break. We introduced our hiking partners to the wonderful smells and sights of tuna on a tortilla. Right? I think we had tuna that day.
Carrie, I'm so impressed. It was exactly 6 miles in.
I knew it because of my hiker just hard knows mileage exactly now.
The sights and smells.
Yeah.
Now, did they do the tuna on a tortilla?
No,
or did
not the first day.
They brought
a sub sandwich with them, which looked so much better than what I was having.
Carrie and I were eating our tuna, and we were like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Why didn't we bring ourselves a sub sandwich?
Interesting. And actually, they were very adventurous with their foods because they had the trail pizzas.
Yes.
And so they kind of introduced us to the world of trail pizzas. Although I think they were like, we don't want to eat tuna, and I sent them a link about the trail pizzas because I was like, I'm a little too scared to try the unrefrigerated cheese. But I'll let them give it a go.
Thinking back to when we were doing the John Muir Trail and when we met Matt and Peter at Red's Meadow, they had shipped themselves a block of Tillamook cheese. So we knew in our hearts that it was okay to eat cheese that hadn't been refrigerated for apparently days.
Weeks.
Or months. Oh gosh.
No. Weeks.
But we just couldn't bring ourselves to do it until Kate and Drew, they got is it Laughing Cow cheese? Or Baby Bell? Baby Bell, but it was Gouda. Mm-hmm. And it was didn't
Gouda.
Get sick, and they were fine. And so Carrie and I have very much embraced the trail pizzas from that moment on.
When we have space
just
in our
needed to watch someone physically eat it and then be okay, and they were. So we enjoyed our time at Umbrella Falls, and had a little bit of a rest. And Drew had kind of gone through and figured out an itinerary as well as us, and we kind of meshed some options as far as campsites and things like that. And I think that the way he had planned out the first day to Cooper Spur was like something in the neighborhood of 13 and a half miles. So we thought, we'll add on another mile. It'll be 14 and a half miles with the reroute, maybe, edging up to 15 because there's always variability. But that's a perfectly fine first day. But little did we know we weren't anywhere close to halfway done at the 6 mile point. We had a big day ahead of us still.
Yeah. And one funny thing that happened at Umbrella Falls, so Molly and I actually went with a guide this summer to do a guided climb on Sahali Peak in the North Cascades, which was very cool.
Yeah.
And we, for whatever reason, in our crazy minds, were like, we're going to do our backpacking trip around Mount Hood, and then we'll give ourselves 2 days off, and then we're going to go and do this climbing expedition. Because honestly, we've always done like back-to-back things before.
Yes.
And I feel like we were feeling good, we were feeling strong, we were feeling ready to go. And then Molly was like, I just got, did you get called? Or she's like, I just got an email from our climbing guide asking me to call him so that we could, figure out what we wanted to do. And I was like, okay, well, you better call him because, we actually have service right here. Yeah. So I just remember it was so funny because I'm trying to look at the map that I've been given by the Mount Hood Meadows Ski Associate. And I'm trying to figure out which number we're supposed to go on because there's no one guiding the major junctions.
I'm on my
on the phone
with our guide Jeff,
and she's
talking about our goals and aspirations for our climbing trip.
Yeah, which was
as I'm like, I'm currently walking around Mount Hood, and he's like, well, I hope you're building in at least 3 days of rest. And I'm like,
did he say 3 days of rest?
He was
he never transferred that information to me.
I think he said, well, I hope you're giving yourself 2 or 3 days off in between.
I thought he just said, I hope you're giving yourself
He said 2 or 3 days, and I thought, well, he did say 2.
Well, he didn't say 2. Say it. You should have said it out loud.
Oh, I didn't say 3, did I?
You didn't say any days to me.
Exactly. I felt like it would be better to not tell you that.
Well, it would have made me feel better if you would have told me that because I was like, what does he mean? We need a week off? And then I was like,
sorry. I should have told you.
I was like, look at us. Maybe we should have built in more time off. But
it turned out that we were fine.
Yeah, it was perfectly fine.
We did great.
And actually, I mean, I think sometimes I'll limp a little off of our backpacking trip and then driving in the car. But then it was funny because when we drove up there, we had to do our gear check-in, and I was walking in there, and I was like, I won't be limping. And I wasn't, and I was fine.
Good job, Carrie.
But anyway, so that was just a comical addition to our trip where Molly's on the cell phone, and I'm checking the trail, and there's other hikers who are trying to ask me where they should go. And then Molly's like, Carrie, what do you want me to say to him about this thing?
I know, because Carrie would be the one that he should have talked to. And I just needed to be reciting everything that Carrie ever told me. As far as our dreams of what we wanted to accomplish on our trip, I was like, Carrie, what did we want to accomplish on this trip?
She was like, yeah, it's just funny because Molly was the one who set up everything. So I think you're the one that got emailed, which was totally fine because I hate calling people on the phone. So I'd have been like, can I call you in 6 to 18 business days after our trip? But anyway, it was just funny because it was just such a chaotic situation. And I'm like, don't worry, Kate and Drew, I know where we're going. And she's like, and we want to go do this thing. And it was such a funny moment. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. If you want to see any pictures or videos of what we talked about today, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Two Sisters on Adventures. If you want to watch the video version of this podcast, you can see us on YouTube. And if you want to follow or subscribe or leave a review, those are always appreciated because we wouldn't mind if other people heard about our podcast from you. So anyways, thanks again for listening. Bye.